Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Another monumental week in politics globally and in our dear country of Scotland. And as you can see, I have two of the people who have been probably spoken most about in Scottish circles, political circles this week, and that's I am delighted to welcome back two friends of the show, Craig Murray and Tommy Sheridan. Gentlemen, thank you for turning up and being here today.
Pleasure.
To see you. Craig, if I can start with you, Tommy, maybe you'd like to give the background without too much dirty linen, but the collapse of Alba and how that made you feel, etc., and where it sort of brought you to this.
Roddy, the whole show could be taken up with the narrative of what happened. And the truth is, you could give me 5 minutes or 5 hours and I still wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of the real reason, because all of the reasons given so far, I think, are fluff. I just do not believe that any of the financial scare stories that were put out by the leadership of Alba are the reason why Alba has been wound up, because we showed the Alba Continuation Group, including myself, Angus Brendan McNeil, Suzanne Blackley, Christina Henry, and others, we showed in a 48-hour period that even with the limited contacts we had within the movement, we raised £25,000 in pledges, £25,000 in pledges. We were denied access to the contact details for the Alba members, some 4,000 members. We were told by the others involved with the organisation of the party that Alba has contact with 14,000 people who have at one time or other pledged their support for Alba. If we had the ability to even just contact our members and ask for, look, the election's coming up, can you give us 20 quid? We would have raised £40,000 easily. We showed that we could raise money from the movement generally. So the idea that there were insurmountable financial problems is just rubbish. It's just rubbish. I mean, we saw accounts, and I got attacked at the meeting last Sunday, the NEC meeting last Sunday. I get screamed and shouted at from people because I dared. The accusation was I had given the accounts to the public. And of course, I had to interrupt the shouting and screaming to say, if you're going to shout and scream, please make it accurate. I never gave it to the public. I gave it to members of Alba. And members of Alba are the ones who are supposed to be the lifeblood of that party. And they were denied access to the accounts. They couldn't even see their own bloody accounts. So the idea that I committed a crime by giving it to members, I reject wholeheartedly and believe I've done the right thing. However, the accounts miraculously had a statement in it from the independent auditor for the 24 accounts to say that we had went from an £80,000 deficit in 23 to a £5,000 surplus in 24, and that the party was, quote, a going concern. It was a solvent party. Now we were presented last Sunday with an amended version, and the amended version says, I am now passing these accounts on a breakup basis. And I said, so why the change? What's happened? It's all your fault. It's because you released the accounts. So the idea is that I released the accounts to say that we were solvent, but that forced the auditor then to then say, no, you're not solvent, despite the fact they said they were solvent. It is garbage, Roddy. What has been happening behind the scenes is that we have been kept in the dark. And the most important point to make here is that the single most drastic decision that a party can ever make is to fold, is to give up the ghost, is to throw in the towel. And all we were asking for, people like me and Angus and Suzanne and Christina, what we were asking is, let the members decide. And what the 47, or the Sleekit 7, as I called them, what they wanted to do was fold without the members even getting a say. And the reason I call them Sleekit is because they then put out an email and they actually said, the other people say they've raised money, but we've not seen a penny of it. They know it was pledges, but they're so sleek, so sly that they were trying to put in there the idea that money had been raised and it had to be given. It was dishonest, it was deceitful, it was dishonourable, and every one of that Sleekit 7 should be ashamed of themselves. They had taken decisions in the last couple of weeks, Roddy, which were absolutely unforgivable, indefensible, ditching candidates who'd been voted in. A democratic vote of members to lead the Lothians list. And because that candidate wasn't liked by that Sleekit 7, they decided to vote him down and dump him, despite what the members had voted. Now, see, once you've done that, it really is the point of no return in terms of voting against a democratic vote of your members in a members' party. So it's all very, very sad. People like myself and others fought hard to try and reverse the decision. We fought for since the 7th of February when the original email, the terrible email, was released through to last Sunday. We fought very, very hard. We did everything we could. We offered them an unconditional indemnity. Angus, Brendan McNeill sent an unconditional indemnity. That was the other reason I called them Sleekit, because in their email they say that they were offered no indemnities. They were offered two. One was a conditional indemnity, which is the only one I wanted them to get, because I was prepared to indemnify them from future liabilities and future expenditure. What I wasn't prepared to indemnify them from was whatever they've done in 2025. What is it they're hiding for 2025? However, in order to save the party, it was decided, no, we're going to have to be silly, we're going to have to be stupid, and we're going to have to give them an unconditional indemnity if that's the way we can get the party back and keep it going. So we offered an unconditional indemnity, and all we said, all that was in that legal document was, can you please detail the liabilities and debts that are currently outstanding in order that we can prioritise the ones that need to be paid immediately? And they refused to do it. They refused to do it. What are they hiding? That's the question. So from my point of view, it's been very acrimonious. It's been very difficult, because people who I used to have respect for, I've now lost respect for, because I think they've lied to us. But at its core, I think there were a group of people within Alba who wanted to fight, and there were a group of people within Alba who wanted to fold. And those who wanted to fold, unfortunately, held all the aces. They had the cards. They turned off the communications. We couldn't communicate with our members, and they took a disgraceful decision last Sunday. We're now having to cope with that, because all of us believe in independence. That's why we were in Alba. It's why I joined as a founding member, along with a lot of other people. It's why I took a decision, and you'll be aware of this, Roddy, as will Craig. Sorry, I've spoke for ages, and I'll finish on this. I'm sorry, you've asked one question and I went on and on and on. But you will remember that people like myself and Craig had already formed a list vote-based organisation that was for independence only, along with Dave Thompson and many, many others in the independence movement, called Action for Independence. We formed it in 2020. We did a lot of graft, a lot of hard work, and we got list candidates in all of the 8 regions ready for the 2021 Scottish Parliament election. Craig was going to be top of the list in Lothians. I was going to be top of the list in Glasgow. Afi was looking good and looking strong. We had some fantastic candidates. I think even Eva Comrie, I'm pretty sure Eva may have, it may be that we hoped that Eva would be the candidate, but then I think Eva was contacted behind the scenes by those that were at that time thinking of forming Alba, because it was kept secret, if you remember, and then at the last minute it was launched in 2021, and Afi had a decision to make. Do we continue to stand and look for the list vote and risk taking votes away from Alba, or in the interest of maximum unity in the independence movement, do we withdraw from the election and support Alba? And that's what we decided to do.
Yep.
We did that, I think, with the right reasons. I think it was the right decision at the time. However, some people have since regretted it because of some of the developments. And now I feel as though we're back to square one.
Well, I'm going to talk about that, but can I just say, who wouldn't want Eva as their number one? I mean,
sorry,
who wouldn't want Eva as number one?
Exactly. Well, that's why we'd asked her. She is a incredible independence champion.
She is indeed.
But she's also a very, very strong independent woman.
Correct.
Who can hold her own in any debate or any company, and therefore that's why Afi had hoped. And I'm now trying to, because we're talking about something that happened 6 years ago.
We'll come back to that.
I think she had agreed to do it, but then I think people behind the scenes had contacted her to say, look, Alec's going to launch a party. Would you be prepared to be part of that? And I think that given Eva's support for Alec, then I think she decided to do that. The point I'm making, and I'll finish on this, Roddy, is that we had a list vote only organisation at that time, which was trying to exploit the fact that the voting system is rigged. It's rigged against the second vote counting for anybody that wins the constituencies. And therefore we said, instead of votes getting wasted, give it to another independent supporting organisation. That's what we did with AFI, but we were willing to stand down in the interests of maximum unity. And that story's dead important, Roddy, for some of the recent publicity. People like me were willing to step down for the interests of maximum unity and for maximum success within the independence movement. So I'll take lectures from no one who try and make accusations now about glory hunting and all the types of crap that you hear getting thrown at us. So that's just an important piece of background as far as the Alba demise and the history of AFI is concerned.
Sure. We were, as Tommy said, Craig, we were all founder members of Alba. We've had never, on this podcast, I've never had any kind of discussion. I leave that to others and people. We didn't want to attack a fellow independence supporting party. But it is sad today, Craig, that Alba has fallen by the wayside. Now, from someone who is involved with the Alliance to Liberate Scotland, you know, I should be saying, well, that's all right because we benefited. But I'm not. I wrote a blog about it during the week. It was a sad anything that affects or is detrimental to the independence movement. We should all mourn. Am I not? Would you agree?
Yeah, obviously it's extremely sad, but I mean its demise came after a long period of things happening which just no one could understand what the hell was going on. I fundamentally, look, when I was not sure if I had an internet glitch there, something strange happened.
You're okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
When I was a member, I was paying £5 a month. And at one stage, there were some 5,000 other members. And that gives you a very substantial income. And how a party that never fought an election burned through all that money, and it didn't have an office. I don't understand. I really, really don't understand where a very substantial income went. And we had all the nonsense, if you recall, about various elections, including one in which you and I were both involved, Roddy, where the election results disappeared or were hidden. At one stage, we were told that election results couldn't be released because of the Data Protection Act. You weren't allowed to know how many candidates got how many votes, which is the first time I'd ever heard that. So, with the best will in the world, we stuck with it for years trying to make it work. But on the top, both before and after Alex, there were just some incredibly shady things happening, which does no good for the cause of independence at all, because it just appeared wrong. It just appeared extremely dodgy. And I'm, as Tommy says, we stood down as candidates in order to make way for Alba, and we wished it well, and we put our backs into it. But I can't say as a vehicle I'm sad it's gone, really, because it just had such a long history of manipulation, but by its leadership, and that seems to have gone through, whether or not Alex was there or Alex wasn't there. These very, very strange things were happening. Anyway, let's move on from it, because it does no one any good to poke the wreckage.
Which brings me on to Tommy. Which brings me on to my next question, which is simply this.
I'm awful sorry, but just given that this is an historical record, please allow me just one. And Craig's right about moving on, but I didn't know you were going to ask the question that you asked, or else I would have referred to this. I've got the accounts right in front of me here. Here is the document that was referred to, the original 7th of February NEC, and this is dead important because this was signed off by the independent auditor 20th February 2026, and I need to read you. And this is under conclusions relating to going concern. Based on the work we have performed, we have not identified any material uncertainties relating to events or conditions that individually or collectively may cast significant doubt on the party's ability to continue as a going concern for a period of at least 12 months from when the financial statements are authorised for issue. This is written 20th of February 2026 by the independent auditor. And the final point in relation to what Craig has said, it's made a very, very important point. Here's the actual figures for the income for Alba in 2023. Membership subscriptions in 2023, £229,000. For 2024, £220,000, 925. So let's round up to £221,000. Imagine an income of £221,000 as your baseline as a political party, and you think that you can survive. Come on, there's going to be an investigation at one time, and I think we'll find that things have went wrong badly.
Which brings me on, Craig, to my next question is, no Alba. I mean, the point I'd like to make for some of the viewers out there, if Alba, we had been trying from day one to get Alba to join into an alliance. We wanted to do that, same as we did with the SNP. And I would honestly say it's very possible. If the SNP made a deal, we probably wouldn't have any constituency candidates just now. We'd all be on the list, and there'd be no SNP on the list. That would be not just we, but any pro-independence people would be on the list. There'd be no SNP. We wouldn't be fighting against the SNP in the constituencies. That's just the fact. So if we'd been with Alba, you would have been number one in Glasgow, Tommy. We'd have still been on the same side. We'd have been in the same election. All that's changed now is the badge for Tommy. But it is, Craig, what we have to... Why did you decide to come to the Alliance to Liberate Scotland?
Well, I was determined, having stepped down in the last Scottish parliamentary elections to make way for Alba, I was determined to stand this time. I've spent the last few months trying to make sure that your party became a pro-independence party, because when your party was launched, it seemed to have a lot of momentum behind it. It got, with UK-wide, it got 800,000 people sign up. In Scotland, it got 40,000 people sign up, and it looked like it was going to be a force in Scottish politics. So my determination was, because those people are socialists, and because the vast majority of socialists in Scotland are pro-independence, my determination was to make sure if there is an important new party, it will be a pro-independence party. And we succeeded in that. At its Scottish founding conference, it voted to be a pro-independence party, not a pro-referendum party or pro-the right to choose party, but an explicitly pro-independence party. And I think that's very important. However, also, sadly, due to internal feuding and disputes and incompetence and in my view, due largely to a lot of people wanting to recreate the mechanisms of the Labour Party and impose them on the membership. It hasn't got off the ground. It's not got itself into a position to fight these elections. And in Edinburgh, where I am, it's not going to be fighting the elections. I was still determined to stand. And I was thinking of standing as an independent. But I'd been talking to you, Roddy, and to others about Alliance for some time. I wasn't sure whether it would come to fruition and actually be fighting the elections. But once it became plain that Alliance are indeed going to be fighting the elections, and that I was determined to fight an election, and that Scottish independence is the defining question of our lives, bluntly, as well as of this election. It just made no sense at all to fight each other and not get together, because all of us, all three of us, know each other, and all three of us are dedicated supporters of Scottish independence, and that is the number one issue. And giving people the chance to vote for somebody who doesn't just say they're for Scottish independence, but actually intends to do something about it, rather than make a career out of it, as the SNP have done. I think giving people that chance to give the SNP a real kick and say, you've got to stop taking the votes of independent supporters for granted. You're just making a living out of pretending to be interested in independence when you've got no real interest in independence at all. So it seemed to me just essential to give as many voters as possible the chance to vote for genuine pro-independence candidates, and that's why I'm doing it, and that's why I've come on board with Liberate.
Absolutely fantastic. Of course, it goes back like Labour with, I don't know if you know this, but it's the next general election, Craig, the Labour Party are going to have abolished the House of Lords in their manifesto. They think it's a great new novel idea. It's almost like we're in favour of independence. Like the Green Party in Scotland, Tommy, every 5 years they suddenly find their independence credentials. But your reasons for joining Alliance to Liberate Scotland, would you like to elucidate them for the people?
Sure. I think it's important to have a bit of background, Roddy. You and I have known each other for many, many years. We've gone way back to the referendum in 2014, and we have been friends, even though you're a blue nose. I put that to the side, and I'm still friendly with you. And we have been in the same party for a period of time, because you joined Alba as well. And you were a very prominent member of Alba, as were many of those who are now Alliance to Liberate Scotland party members. So there is no Chinese wall between us. We were all friends. I remember coming over to the stall, the Independence for Independence stall that was at the 2024 Hope Over Fear rally. It was the last public event that Alec actually addressed, which rest his soul. And you and I and Eva had a chat because a lot of what was going on within Alba I wasn't aware of. I was caring for my mother. I then was doing a social work degree. I wasn't as active in the higher echelons of Alba, shall we say. I was just a member who paid my subscriptions and supported it online as best I could. I remember being absolutely appalled by the idea of Kenny standing in Grangemouth in the 2024 election. I thought it was stupidity, because Eva had already announced that she was standing as an independent.
5 weeks.
That seemed to me to be absolutely clear that Eva lived in the area, she worked in the area, she had the reputation and credibility in the area. And then for Alba to decide, I don't know who decided it, because I wasn't certainly on NDC at that time, to stand Kenny. It was just stupidity, but worse than stupidity, it was political sectarianism. And that's what really got me. It was political sectarianism, because there is an independence, good independence, credible independence candidate. Why are you standing another independence candidate? And you know what? Alba got what it deserved. It got Adoon, the deputy leader of the party at that time, got less votes than Eva Comrie, some 250 or so less votes, which was an embarrassment in my opinion. So from my point of view, I thought I need to get involved here because I had already said to you guys in September, listen, if I have my way, Alba will build more bridges. That was the point I made. Alba has been blowing up bridges with people in the independence movement. We've had too many fallouts, too many people leaving, too many good people leaving. If I have my way, I want to build bridges. And that's what I've always tried to do within the independence movement, is build bridges. The unionists are big and strong. We cannot take them on divided. We need to take them on as united as possible. That's the lessons of history. You never beat unionism when you're divided. You need to be maximum united in the face of their terror and their fear strategies. So from my point of view, you and I have been in contact for many, many years. We've always maintained our friendship. You were interested in what was happening within Alba. I was perfectly willing to let you know my opinion of what was happening within Alba. When we spoke on the Sunday evening, I'm pretty sure I messaged you to let you know what had happened. We ended up having a phone call. You told me then that the Alliance Party had not yet decided all its candidates. I mean, that's key here. It's not as if Craig and I have come in swanning into a party that's already got its candidates in place. So you told me that they hadn't selected candidates. Would you be willing to be considered? Would you be willing to have your name put forward? And I said yes. Of course I did.
Not quite how I remember it, but it was close. You were saying to me you were available. I didn't say to you.
Listen, I said that people were telling me to stand as an independent. That's what people were saying to me. Stand as an independent. You said, well, we've not selected our candidates yet.
That's right.
I said, well, if the Alliance is looking for a candidate, I'm willing to have my name put forward. You said that you no problem with that whatsoever because you had respect for me over many, many years and mutual respect that we've had for each other. So from my point of view, the idea of signing up with the Alliance on a single issue, that this is what is got to be absolutely vital. When we were in Alba, there were several issues. And by the way, not all of, there are international issues that I would have preferred Alba to be stronger on, that they weren't. So I didn't agree with everything, but we had several issues. You then discussed, look, the very, very core of the Alliance is nothing more, nothing less, independence. That's the single issue. From my point of view, I had already said in the statements I put out as an Alba candidate that for me, the single priority in this election is independence, because I want to tackle poverty and inequality and homelessness and low pay and the chronic underfunding of public services, including our NHS and our local councils. That has to happen. But it can't happen unless we've got independence. So that's what makes it the priority. It is the number one priority. I also want, by the way, Scotland to take a very independent route in relation to condemning Israel and expelling the ambassador and standing with Palestine. That can't happen unless we're independent either. So not only the most important bread and butter issues mean that independence is the priority, but even those wider international issues demand that Scotland's independent.
Yeah. Craig, that's the thing. In 2014, when we were all campaigning, all of us and millions of others, for independence, it was a binary question. When you were standing in George Square or on the Mound in Edinburgh, you didn't know the guy next to you if he was a Tory or a non-aligned or a Liberal. You didn't know what his politics were on the EU or NATO. You only knew it was yes or no. It was simple. Now, that's almost what we're trying to recreate, because we're saying independence, nothing else. It's other people that are trying to bring in other issues. But it is a simple question we're asking the people. Independence, nothing else. Surely that's the way to go forward.
Well, for me, it is. I mean,
I was asking Craig, Tommy. I was asking that to Craig, no you, mate.
Right, you never said Craig.
I did say Craig, you weren't listening.
Well, from my point of view, I agree completely. We're trying to make this election about independence, but something has to happen. Something has to give. The UK gets worse and worse and worse. You've got reform coming up because of the failures of Labour, because the working class feel abandoned. You've got this following the United States and Israel blindly. You've got a government which seems totally under control of the Zionist lobby. Scotland needs to escape from all this. That is what we need to do at this time. And if I can go back to 2014, there were 3 people in the referendum campaign who made by a mile more speeches than anybody else, who did more campaigning than anyone else, who were on platforms talking more than anyone else throughout the independence campaign, who spoke to more individuals than anybody else. And those 3 people were Tommy and me and Robin McAlpine. We were absolutely at the heart of the People campaign, and it was a campaign on the streets that did so well in the elections. It was a campaign, there were so many times when we were making completely impromptu speeches in the middle of the street in towns and cities all over Scotland, and we need to get back to that. And yes, I obviously. There will be people with whom I disagree on all kinds of things, but we can sort out those things once we are independent. We need to have the powers of an independent country in order to have control of our economy, to have control of our foreign policy, to give us the full autonomy, to then sort out secondary questions in a civilized, calm and democratic manner among a community of our nation. But independence is a first order question, and that's the question we really want to put to people at this election.
No, absolutely 100%. Tommy, no, there's been some there's people love throwing up controversies, Tommy, and one of the ones is where you were asking a question: if there's no Alliance to Liberate Scotland candidate in my constituency, who should I vote for? No, your reply was, if there isn't, I think you said if there's any pro-independent, I'll not put words in your mouth. You can tell me what you said. But in my opinion, we've been saying all the time in Prism for a year and a half, 2 years, we said support, and anyone, if you're sure your candidate's pro-independence, support him, and on the list, support a pro-independence candidate. What did you say when you were asked that question?
The actual words I used, Roddy, just so that it's clear, is anyone can go and check it on X. Anyone can check it on Facebook. It's there as a matter of record. My recollection is the question was quite a truncated question along the lines of, after me putting up the bit about the alliance and the single issue and how that single issue is the key that opens up the door to all of the other issues that we need to solve and all the other issues that we need to address. And someone put up, so strategy for election, SNP 1, Atlas 2. Now, I don't like using 1 and 2 because it confuses people. Because we have elections in Scotland where 1 and 2 is actually used. It's the single transferable vote for local elections, and we have to be careful not to confuse people. We don't have a 1 and 2 vote in the Scottish Parliament election in May. We have a constituency and a list vote, and we have to keep making that point. 2 separate ballot papers, no numbers are involved. It's an X in both, and we have to highlight that. My reply, therefore, was around the lines of a preamble that said, I have serious misgivings about the sincerity of the SNP leadership to pursue independence. I appreciate the members want independence, but I have misgivings about the leadership of the SNP. Therefore, in the absence of an Alliance to Liberate Scotland candidate or another genuine independence candidate, my political strategy for the election will be SNP constituency and Alliance list. So clearly there, Roddy, several points. One, that the numbers have to get put out the equation. Don't use numbers. It's no 1 and 2. It's list and constituency. Second point is, in the absence of an Alliance to Liberate Scotland candidate or another, I'm thinking that there may be other independents standing across Scotland that are more genuine than the SNP leadership as far as pursuing independence is concerned. And then the third point, and this is probably the key point that I think has to be handled, my political strategy. We are standing for the alliance on the basis that we endorse one single issue, independence. I am entitled, therefore, to have other views. I am entitled to have other views, as is all the other candidates within the alliance. I may not agree with those other views, but that is irrelevant. The only whip that we guys have, because I'm now a member of the Alliance Party, I joined on Monday morning. The only whip that we have in relation to our candidates is that they must fight for independence as the priority, not one of a list of priorities, the priority. What you think on other things, that's going to be up to you. You can defend yourself on that. It's not for the Alliance Party to defend you on that, as long as you stick with the independence priority.
Correct, absolutely. Can I just make a point, ladies and gentlemen, before I go to Craig, and that's this. The Alliance to Liberate Scotland True Sovereignty Party stood down in Inverness because they didn't want to stand against Fergus Ewing. Now, personally, if I could just say, Fergus, why his mother was my greatest hero in the independence movement ever, Fergus's politics are way to the right of me. I mean, so far right, it could be Jimmy Johnston. And I'm Davy Wilson in the other wing, showing my age here, Tom. Yeah, I know. I remember my players.
You go see Willie Henderson, but there you go.
I know. I was playing. I was giving you I was throwing you a wee salt. But we stood aside for the cause, and that's what we need you to think about, ladies and gentlemen. The cause. Not your pet little projects, not the things that you think are the most important, because without independence, we can really do nothing or virtually nothing about the things that need to get done. But Craig, a bigger problem people should be worrying about, in my opinion, at home, is that, consistently for about 2 years now, we're seeing that it's 50 to 50, I've seen as high as 59% in favour of independence, and the SNP 30 to 35%. So there's somewhere between 20 and 29% of pro-independence supporters who do not feel enthused enough to come to the ballot box. Surely that should be the biggest concern of all independence supporting people.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's something we have to look at very, very carefully. I mean, a remarkable fact is that in pretty well every opinion poll for the last few years, if you look at the breakdowns, about 30% of Labour Party voters in Scotland actually support independence. But they've not been enthused enough to switch their vote, either because they're from traditional Labour supporting families or because they don't believe the SNP will do anything about it anyway. But there's now a gap of a minimum of 15% of the electorate who support independence but don't vote SNP. And it's obvious why to anybody, because in the real world there is no link between the SNP and independence. The SNP have been in power now for years and years without any intention to do anything about independence whatsoever, other than ask Westminster for permission, which they know they will never get, and it's hiding behind Westminster. And it should be said loudly and clearly: if you believe that you must have permission from Westminster, you don't believe in Scottish independence. You don't believe in Scottish self-determination. You can't believe in self-determination and think self-determination means someone else's permission. It's a logical impossibility. And the SNP position on this is just completely and utterly dishonest. One thing I fear is, and this is something which you can't actually tell from the polls, is that there may be a high propensity not to vote among that 15 to 20% of the electorate who believe in independence but don't vote SNP. Some of them go out and vote Labour. A lot of them probably are sitting on their hands and sitting at home, and among the 40% of the electorate who don't bother to vote at all because they just don't see the point of it. And we need to infuse people. We need to say to them, we are actually going to move on independence. We are going to move for UDI. We are going to move for the Parliament to declare independence. We're not in this because we're not a have another referendum party. We're not a let the people decide, people have the right to decide party. We are an independence party, and we're not interested in political careers that last for years and years on the back of saying one day we'll try and ask Westminster to do something about independence. We acknowledge that Scotland is going to have to take its independence without the permission of Westminster. And I think it's very important people should be able to say that. And frankly, people who are not prepared to say that they will never take independence, the people whose position is they will never take independence without the permission of Westminster, are not actually independent supporters, in my view.
No, and there's also the other ones who, unless it's you do X, 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 and X and Y, I will not get independence. They want the result before we get the result. Ridiculous. But here's Tommy. Not that we need reasons to vote independence. Not that we need more reasons to do it. But this is quite a concern. Starmer, as you know, this got leaked, that he's told these people in Wales and in Scotland that they can just overrun and override the devolved parliaments and anything to try and steal a march for his party mainly, but for the union. That's what we're up against. They're even the limited powers we have, they're trying to shrink them and pull them back.
No doubt about it, Roddy, that Starmer doesn't want the Scottish Parliament. The next step in this stage, the evolving of this horrible, cruel, Zionist and influenced Labour Party, the next stage will be to take the teeth away from the Scottish Parliament and effectively wind up the Parliament. I mean, you already have the racist Reform Party making it clear that they don't believe in the Scottish Parliament. Well, they usually say something one day and it takes a couple of days before Labour parrot it. And that's effectively what will happen here. The rise of the unionists in the Parliament can be checked. It can be checked if those in the independence movement use their votes properly. The way I think we've got to approach these elections in May the 6th is both votes independence. Both votes independence. No numbers. Both votes independence. 2 ballot papers. You use your vote in both ballot papers for independence parties or candidates. Now, in some areas, that will be an Alliance to Liberate Scotland candidate on the constituency and on the list. The list vote is absolutely crucial. In some areas, there will only be the choice of an SNP candidate on the constituency, and whether you like it or not, you may have to hold your nose and do it because it's right to give an independence, even just in words candidate, that constituency vote. But on the list, you have the choice. The choice is there. The Alliance to Liberate Scotland is the serious choice for those who genuinely believe in advancing the cause of independence. That's why the Alliance to Liberate Scotland party is so vital in this election, because without you, Alba's already wound up, there wouldn't be a genuine independence option on that ballot paper. But it's there now. If people sitting at home watching this show or thinking about all of the plethora of problems that we've got in relation to cost of living and insecurity in your job and services that are declining, you now have the option of saying, I want out of this. I want to break the Westminster chains that are holding us down, that are holding us back. I'm voting for a party that wants to break those chains. Doesn't want to ask Westminster to open the door. It wants to have a party that's going to kick down the door. And that's the difference. That's what the Alliance brings to the table.
Yeah, because in my opinion, Craig, the union has never been weaker. And I mean, it's going to tear itself apart. But up in Scotland, the other thing is, it's as always, there is a ceiling for the unionist vote, in my opinion. And now with the advent of reform arriving and Restore, all that's happening is those votes are shuffling around. More than ever, as Tommy alludes to, if we could get unity, we could have an absolute landslide in May the 7th. If all the independent supporters come together and vote wisely.
I think there's no doubt that the historical trend is a weakening of unionism. And, we're not far away at all now from seeing the unity of Ireland, which will be a wonderful thing. Yep. And I didn't ever think in this time scale that we would see Plaid Cymru doing as well as they are, and support for Welsh independence is going up in leaps and bounds, and that's becoming a realistic prospect, which it didn't really look like a realistic short-term prospect 10 years ago, but that's now fully in play. And in Scotland, the opinion polls are now very substantially, at least 5 or 6% on average, better than they were in 2014, at the time of the better than the result we got in 2014. We're now more often than not above 50%. Only about a quarter to a third of opinion polls in the last year have been below 50%. And the margin among young people is enormous. Young people are extremely strongly in favour of independence, and they're not changing their minds as they get older. So the demographic is shifting in our direction as well. There's no doubt at all where this is going. And of course, as you said, people like Starmer, unionists, will try to reduce the powers of the Scottish Parliament, will try to do everything they can to give unionism a boost. But unionism is a dying force. Unionism is dying. Our job is to kill it off quickly and get rid of it and bring immediate relief to the people of Scotland, particularly the people of Scotland who are in poverty and suffering from poorly financed services, and suffering from the ravages of reports and tax avoidance, suffering from all of the social ills that affect the neoliberal state. Our job is to bring an end to that. But it is very, very doable. History is on our side, but it requires the nerve to seize the moment, and it requires people who wish to actually do it, who aren't trying to make a career out of politics, who are not attempting to administer the union, because the SNP has fallen into the trap of administering the union. Yeah, I haven't really spoken about this question of who you vote for. Yes, obviously in each constituency, vote for the best pro-independence candidate in each constituency. There will be other choices. We've spoken of Fergus Ewing. There are some Greens who are genuinely pro-independence. There are many who are not, but there are some Greens who may be a better pro-independence choice in a constituency where they're standing than the SNP. There's some people in the SNP who are genuinely pro-independence. I wouldn't want to give a hard and fast answer as to who you vote for on the constituency vote. There's some SNP people I wouldn't vote for in any circumstances whatsoever as individuals. And, MI5's man in Scotland, Angus Robertson, is one that I would put in that category, for example, who's a firm Zionist who has never shown any genuine enthusiasm for independence, and other people who were involved in the plot against Alex Salmond, I wouldn't vote for in under any circumstances. So there are, but it's not up to me, and it's not up to any of us to tell people how to vote. People can work out. We can give our advice, and Tommy's given his advice. And my advice is very similar to Tommy's. Vote for the best independent candidate available to you. You have available in your constituency, and that may sometimes be the SNP, but very often it won't be.
If I could quote Alan Peterson, he was the one that said that anyone that we get elected, with the exception of the whip on independence, is answerable to their constituents. Now, people, that should be refreshing to you. We're going to try and get politicians in who are answerable to their constituents, not to a party whip or to a party ideology. Because at the moment, the union, as I say, is failing, Tommy. They're fighting among themselves. Their only policy is SNP bad, independence bad, and they'll tell any lie, they'll do anything. But here again this week, we Sarwar get caught out again. They tried to blame the fire in Union Street on SNP cuts to the fire service, and the fire chiefs have been rapid to come back and say nonsense. They had all the facilities, all the equipment they needed to do it. And the fact that these people, these unionists, are so out of ideas for Scotland that they'll tell any lie to try and get power.
Roddy, I find Sarwar's position nauseating, completely and utterly nauseating, from the point of view of both opportunism and lack of political substance. He made a statement about the judgment of Starmer and called for him to step down because his judgment in relation to Mandelson as the ambassador for the US was questionable, and he therefore felt it was time that he should go. This is the same Starmer who several years previous had already said that it was okay for Israel to blockade Gaza, to cut off water to Gaza, to cut off food to Gaza, to bomb children in refugee camps in Gaza. But Sarwar waits a couple of years to question Starmer's judgment. How bloody opportunistic, how lacking in substance is that man, that he only waits till it looks as though it's better for him to question his judgment instead of calling him out as a Zionist shill when he should have, a man who was unprepared to call out Israel for their war crimes and claim clearly that they were committing genocide. He didn't have the balls, he didn't have the courage to attack Starmer then when young children were being blown to smithereens. But now that he's near an election and it's better for him, he thinks, oh, I'll come out now and attack Starmer. It is nauseating in its lack of substance and its lack of courage.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the irony of it, Craig. Sarwar's boss is Starmer. He's fighting every day to get Starmer, keep Starmer in office and keep the hegemony of the Labour Party over. But he said to the public in Scotland, Starmer's not good enough. We've got to get rid of him. But he's telling them today, literally, he's telling them every other day, I vote for me because that's a vote for Starmer. The hypocrisy is unbelievable.
My dad.
I think Craig said the interruption of a child. Never want with children and animals, Roddy.
And Techie's not here. She's out campaigning. I don't know how to edit. So, folks, enjoy this moment. It's like that thing with the BBC. Remember when the kids come in and the nanny come in to pull them?
Do you know what, Roddy? It does show you, expose the authenticity of the show yet again.
Absolutely.
It's not live. Yes, of course it's live.
We didn't have any dogs barking today, Tommy. We normally have dogs barking. There's no dog. But wait, back in the room. Are you back in the room with us? Are you back in the room with us, Craig?
He just has to press the unmute. There you go.
There you go.
I'm back. So that was little Oscar interrupting me to ask me about cat food, which is terribly important.
Did he come in and say independence, nothing less? Is that what he said?
Something like that. Yeah. No, I mean, we all know that Labour in Scotland's only a branch office anyway. It doesn't have any autonomy. And it's remarkable. You know, they had a vote to abolish juries on certain trials in England and Wales, something which the SNP has been keen on doing in Scotland too. And the Scottish Labour MPs, only Labour MPs voted for, no MP of any other shape or form in Westminster voted for abolishing jury trials across a whole heap of offences. Only Labour Party MPs voted, but Scottish Labour MPs voted for the abolition of jury trials in England and Wales, a measure which doesn't affect Scotland at all. And that, if you like, shows Labour's disrespect for the nations of the United Kingdom, the fact that they have no sensitivity or feel whatsoever for the different traditions and cultures and different rights of the nations which are currently held prisoner within the United Kingdom. And so was hypocrisy and the fact that it was obviously felt that it would look good if he were to oppose Starmer, but he obviously didn't mean it because he's not been sacked and Starmer's still there. All of this is a sham, and Tommy's moral outrage is absolutely right, because people are being killed. People I knew in Lebanon when I was there for 6 months last year have been killed in the last few days in a massive Israeli onslaught on Lebanon. We have people dying in this illegal attack on Iran, all of which is fully supported by the Labour government. We've got the SNP failing to stop the use of Prestwick for American armed forces movements. These matters of massive moral import that result in the physical death and destruction of children are happening all around us. And Scottish politics hooters on in its own little way, looking at small questions and ignoring the moral responsibility politicians bear for these terrible, terrible events.
Yeah, I would suggest that if Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, had jurisdiction over Prestwick, the American planes would not be flying in and out of Prestwick. And that's the way it should be. I always am immediately, if we're on the same side as the British foreign policy, then I figure there's something suspicious about you. We should never be on the same side as them in that. Tommy, but here's the other thing. We've touched on it, but if the last week we discussed in the programme here, the MP Reid, Johnny Reid, who stood down because her husband had been some charges. Not going to talk about that of spying for China. We've had a guy who was given prison time for lobbying on behalf of Russia. But here's the hypocrisy in our politics. There, Vic Cooper is just one of many. £215,000 from the Friends of Israel, and we wonder why we are helping in a genocide. We've got to get away from that kind of stuff.
Roddy, the petition to drive the Zionist lobby out of British politics, I think, has reached well over 100,000. I think it then demands a debate. I think once you get a petition over 100,000, there must be a debate in Parliament. That debate has to be heard, because people who talk, I mean, they spin all these yarns about Russian influence, about Chinese influence, and it is complete and utter pish. What we do have, however, is Zionist influence. Zionism runs Westminster and Washington, and that's the key. Zionism is pulling all the strings, and if we really want foreign powers out of our politics, what we need to do is expel the Zionist influence from Westminster as soon as possible. I have absolutely no problem with Russia as a country. I do not see Russia as an enemy. I think it's hypocritical for people to annually celebrate the liberation of Europe and not recognize the absolutely essential role of Russia in that liberation from the jackboots of Nazism. If it hadn't been for Russia, we wouldn't have won the Second World War. That's just simple fact. And we should always pay homage to that necessary recognition of history. However, what is getting pushed forward all the time, it's almost like being back at school, Roddy. I can remember being in Lourdes Secondary in the late 70s, and we were told then that the Russians were coming over the hill. We needed nuclear weapons because the Russians were going to invade. I used to always think, well, what do they want to invade us for? It rains in Glasgow all the time. What do they want to come to us for? And of course, we now have a return to that utter nonsense in order to justify more and more money going into armaments, going into defence, instead of going into our health service and our education. So from my point of view, we need people in the Scottish Parliament who are going to be saying, no, hands off all of our influences here. We want Scotland to be a proud, independent nation that has the hand of solidarity to countries across the world who are keeping international law. And from my point of view, right now, that Scottish Parliament is far too much influenced by the Israeli lobby, not as much as Westminster, but I'm afraid it's going that way.
Yeah. So we're beginning to run out of time, Craig. We've got detractors out there who are, looking at us and trying to find a negative. It's easier to find a negative than ever to find a positive. What would you say to those who are detractors who tell us, oh, you're not a purist and this isn't right and that's not right, so we can't vote for you because of blah, blah, blah?
Well, I think if two people ever agree on 100% of everything, one of them isn't thinking. It's perfectly normal for people to have differences of opinion on things, and those differences of opinion you sort out in a fair and civilized and democratic and reasonable manner, and with mutual respect for each other, and discuss each other's points and see where you can agree and where you have to agree to differ. But there seems this extraordinary intolerance where it's a part of this whole phenomenon of cancel culture, which seems to have been exacerbated by social media. The idea that if you disagree with somebody on one point, then that's it. It doesn't matter anything else they say on anything is not valid, because there may be 42 points under discussion, and there's one thing you disagree with them on, and you think that invalidates everything they have to say on the other 41 points, which is plainly logically nonsense. And you have people being no platform everywhere. And strangely enough, you may recall that when I joined your party, as I say, in order to move it in the direction of independence, which happened successfully, when I joined your party, 24 people wrote a joint letter, 34 people wrote a joint letter to the national newspaper saying I shouldn't be allowed to join your party because I was not a sufficiently strong supporter of trans people, therefore I should not be allowed to join your party. Now I've joined Alliance to Liberate Scotland. We've had a number of people saying that I'm not a sufficiently strong opponent of trans people, and the truth is, I have my own view on the matter, which may be different to your view or Tommy's view, and is different to those strong trans advocates who opposed me joining your party, and is different to the strongly gender critical people. I put quite a lot of thought occasionally. Well, not a lot of thought. I actually think about gender issues about as often as I think about who will play left back for Port Vale next week. And I've never watched Port Vale in my life. It's not a dominant. It's not a dominant thing I'm especially interested in. But when I have looked at it, I've tried to look at what can be done on a very difficult issue to find compromises to bring people together. And some people take the view it's an issue it's impossible to compromise on. You've either got to be on one side or on the other side. That's not the view I've tried to take, and I perfectly respect people on both sides who disagree with me. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. It's not the most, as I say, if you ask me to make a list of the 50 most important issues affecting people in Scotland, it would not be on the list of the 50 most important issues. And the fact people disagree with me on that one, I've absolutely no idea why it's elevated to such a position of importance, which it really doesn't deserve, because it's something that just doesn't enter the lives of most ordinary people.
Well, it affects 52%. See, I disagree with you. I'm not going to fall out with you. I believe it affects 52%. And the other thing I wouldn't say I couldn't agree with you, that two people can't agree 100%. My wife's sitting there. I agree 100% with everything she says. I would do that. And
not when you're in the pub, Roddy. Not when you're in the pub.
Now, and if I can be pally and agree and walk together arm in arm with a man that supports the Celtic, Tommy, surely other people can set stupid things aside and, you know, fight for the common cause.
I agree with you, Roddy. I will be going to support that Celtic team that you mentioned
And I hope
today
you
at
get pumped.
Parkhead.
And I hope you get
And I
pumped.
have to say to you, I will be meeting with my election agent, Kenny Ross,
Well, good,
former
the Blue Dogs.
secretary of the Fire Brigade Union in Scotland, who is anxious to get the paperwork done. So can you please, at HQ of the Alliance, get the number of candidates and the details of the candidates sorted as soon as possible? Because everybody keeps asking me on social media, where's the list of candidates? Where's the list of candidates?
Well, it's your,
I mean, to explain to everybody, the registration of candidates isn't due until the end of March, 30th of March. But the earlier we get it done, the better, Roddy. So I know you want me to give you more tasks because you're so little to
lots
do.
of time. Lots of time. But I want everyone to know, if it doesn't happen, it's Tommy's fault, because unless Celtic lose today, there's no papers going out, mate. Simple as that.
Roddy, can I just come in and say I need an election agent. If anyone out there is preferably experienced, but if not experienced, enthusiastic to be an election agent, please do get in touch.
Yeah, gentlemen, this has been an absolute pleasure. We'll have to do this again. And ladies and gentlemen, you'll be happy or sad to hear that the midweeks are coming back, and I'll be bringing on more and more of the candidates of the Alliance to Liberate Scotland people, because it's be nice to expose them. These two well-kent faces, you know well enough, but it was important, I thought, today for them to be on here to answer for themselves and to answer some of the criticisms. I would just say this party, everything was founded on one thing and one thing only. We weren't going to get diverted by people's pet projects and people's pet policies. I mean, as I said, I disagree with Craig on that. But it doesn't matter. We agree on the main thing, which is independence. I don't agree with Fergus's politics, but he agrees with independence. Set aside your tiny prejudices for the big cause, and post-independence, we can sort it all out. So, until we see you again, you and yours, please, 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 all of you, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.